Welcome to the Revenue Room podcast, where we explore strategies and insights from CEOs and revenue critical C suite executives who are leading businesses in the data and information economy. Today, I'm joined by two incredible leaders at the forefront of media, data, and technology. Allison Markert, Vice President and Global Head of Strategy and Operations at Future B2B, and Jaime Schultheis, Head of Global Data Partnerships at Bombora. Together, Allison and Jaime represent a powerful collaboration between one of the world's most diverse media companies and the leading provider of B2B intent data. Their work helps brands move beyond clicks and impressions, delivering audience intelligence, enriched first-party data, and measurable business impact at scale. In this episode, we'll explore how Future and Bombora are using data to compete with AI-fueled challengers, unify massive audiences across brands, and redefine how advertisers measure success. We'll also dive into the leadership lessons they've learned while steering their teams through rapid change in the digital economy. Allison and Jaime, welcome to the Revenue Room. I'm so excited to have you both here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Well, why don't we first start off by having you each give a short introduction about your background and career. And Allison, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I started my career actually in investment management at State Street Global Advisors, which is now State Street Investment Management. It's the investment management arm of State Street Bank. It's one of the largest asset managers in the world. And I was really fortunate to have a fantastic commercial education in that environment. I will say that I was not as passionate perhaps about investing as some of my colleagues. And that's what led me to media, where I've enjoyed a 20-year career really in commercial and operational teams. I love the client facing work. I love strategy and evolving the businesses. So my leadership right now is focused heavily on helping bring strategy into action for our teams every day. And that allows me to be a problem solver, a strategist, a servant leader, a builder, and really make sure that what we're doing is putting our strategy in action and seeing results for our brands and for our partners.
What a really interesting background. Jaime, how about you?
So I am on year 25 of a career solely based in media. I've worked with very storied brands, right? Hearst, Tribune, Gannett, and McClatchy before coming to Bombora. To say 25 years is maybe not totally honest because I actually grew up in this business. So I literally learned to walk on the floor of the Duncan Banner, a tiny little newspaper in Duncan, Oklahoma. I have a real appreciation for journalism and what happens in local communities as a result of the content that's being produced because I actually grew up in it. And so I have lived and breathed this my entire life, but professionally have spent 25 years in media and always in the first party data space, which is really interesting. When I first started, I was looking at people and where they live at a terrestrial level, right? How do we get content to people in their mailbox or on their doorstep? And that evolved over time into the digital space and how we're reaching people today on all of their devices.
I didn't know that about your background. And I'm assuming when you were at Revved Up that you really enjoyed talking to Lisa from the Crow's Nest Pass Herald, that she was the regional publisher from Canada.
Not only did I meet her, I think Allie and I actually talked, but if she asked me for a kidney, I would give her one. Her mission is so incredible and I'm behind it and I've been following her story and, she's had some wins and I'm just so excited about it.
Yeah, she was fierce, just definitely a force of nature. Let's talk about the Future and Bombora collaboration. You had an opportunity at Revved Up. Both Allison and you were on stage talking about it. It was very well received by our audience, which is why I thought, hey, we need to get you two on our podcast and share with the larger universe. Tell our audience about the partnerships and how it is really fueled by this intent data and how that's being applied to Future.
Sure. I can start and then Jaime, please feel free to jump in. But as a publisher, I think a lot of it is that we have self-perceptions of who we are and who our audience is. When we think about the data and what we're looking at or trying to understand about our audiences, it's really beneficial to have a different perspective and a lens that gets us outside of our own headspace a little bit. What will never cease to surprise me is kind of who the audience is and what they're interested in. And that piece, could be down to an article level, but we can't really get there entirely by ourselves. We have a huge amount of first party data. There's still a limit to where somebody is in our environment. And so that's really where the partnership helps us see broadly and understand trends and intent and things that we want to be able to understand to better serve our clients and our clients as an audience together to form connections that are meaningful.
JB, any insights?
I will just expound on that a little bit because working with publishers like Future that really do harness this data and its predictive ability is incredibly rewarding to see, right? To acknowledge that even when you're as big as Future, you still have a pulse on what's happening across the B2B ecosystem. So to really dive into the power of this co-op model and understand what's happening outside of your four walls and not just understand it, but in the case of Future, actually apply it to your business in a multifaceted way. So saying, I'm going to really harness the power of knowing within a particular sector what topics are really interesting. And that drives maybe what I'm producing in terms of content for thought leadership or editorial, or, it really, you can go on and on in terms of the different ways that this data can be used from pre-sale all the way to measurement to really show how well you know your audience, how well you're on the forefront of, emerging topics or issues within an industry. That's really been the root of what we've done with Future and other publishers. And it's really exciting to see. And I think more important than ever. And we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think, to give an example, we have more than 200 brands, right? And so in B2B, we have a lot of first party data, but we don't necessarily think about where else, you're going to find the IT decision makers. And when you think of Tom's Guide or Tech Radar or IT Pro, those are a more natural fit in our portfolio, but you're maybe not considering Decanter or Who, What, Where, or other places in our ecosystem that really we do have tech heavy audiences, people who are early adopters, who are interested in technology and are relevant for the B2B audiences as well. So we can take the contextual understanding and all of the things that we know through our first party data, broaden that understanding, and to Jamie's point, come back to drive editorial decisions or tests internally, pilot programs with clients. And it really is, fuels creativity, I think, at the root of things.
Allie, I'm so happy to hear you say that because there are times where we'll send Allison something and we'll say, you will not believe what this audience or what we found or this analysis, right? And because there's just so much rich data to work from. So that's great to hear.
It actually, because I find this part so fascinating, and that is on two levels. One is, you're utilizing the data to uncover hidden or secret buyers, right? Or just uncovered that otherwise without this data would just remain just secret, unmonetized, right? But they are there, but they're just in different, and so you actually can identify, white space opportunities with brands that you may not have identified before. But the other part is that it's like you're actively activating the blending of the Bombora data with your first party data. And that's the thing that bothers me the most is many media companies don't understand the power of that blend, right? The application of Bombora data with their first party data to do what I call a 2 + 2 = 10 equation. So this is one of my frustrations. But the second one is, okay, maybe they do have a partnership, but they're not activating it. They're not using it innovatively to drive like new value, both internally and externally. It sounds like Future is absolutely doing that.
Yeah, we are. I think we're also testing actively, right? So we have teams in the event space and the demand generation space, our media teams, obviously. And there's a lot of places, I think Jamie touched on this, that it's relevant to marketing. And so my perspective there is that a lot of times we kind of put data into one lane and we don't think about the ways that it really should be benefiting the broader organization. And so it's something you've got to be really intentional about, but you do want to understand what are the ways that we can move the business forward? How is this beneficial? We see traction in a certain area of business, and we should be thinking about how that can carry more broadly across the total organization.
What is, from a customer standpoint, and I would imagine you have different maturity levels of advertisers across different brands. How well are they receiving this new way of looking at marketing, right? Capturing audience versus going brand by brand. And with that, how much education does your sales team need to invest in the sales process for maybe some of those advertiser groups that are not as advanced as others?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great question. Certainly for us, the client base is varied when we look at the B2B division. That is everybody from Fortune 500s, multinationals to public nonprofit sectors, small, medium businesses. And for us, we're publishing at about, across about 15 brands in B2B and 24 end markets, depending on how you're counting. The sophistication definitely varies, right? The media and entertainment spaces are really far more sophisticated typically and are able to have a far more tactical conversation. They might understand the value of audience and nuance of audience a lot better. Brand specific or brand led programs might happen in a space like petroleum. We have a Halliburton, and we also have the guy who makes the gaskets on the offshore oil rigs. I think the takeaway really is meeting the client where they are. And that, to your point, means we have to have a sales team that is able to have a lot of different types of conversations. We send our sales teams out with product teams, with client service teams, with the technical delivery teams, just depending on what the conversation requires and who can best facilitate that conversation for the client to gain an understanding. So I would say there's an educational aspect for our team, but also for our customers, depending on where they are in their understanding and their journey. We take a great deal of pride in where we can help move their businesses forward because we're improving their understanding. We're leveraging the full power of our organization and all of the wonderful subject matter experts we have, but making that a dynamic connection. For the sales team, some of them take to it more readily than others. It's something that we expect to be an ongoing state of support. It's a constant dialogue and it requires a really good feedback loop from all teams that are client facing.
Jaime, anything to add that you've seen in terms of, maybe not just with Future, but with other clients and the education of customers and how that applies to sales?
I would say if I'm looking at where there's a gap in our industry and an opportunity for somebody to come in and really help media companies, it would be in this training space and getting salespeople and media organizations very comfortable with selling a whole audience as opposed to a brand. That's just food for thought, right? For those that are going to be listening, I do think there's a real opportunity for that because as it is right now, at least the publishers that we're working with, that is a learning cycle. It's a very different way of going to market. And I haven't found that perfect solution to recommend to publishers to say, this is where I would go if I were going to train up my sales team on how to really change how they're going to market. I think that there's a real opportunity and maybe Future's the one that's going to lead it because they're doing it better than me.
Well, what I heard from Allison, because I talk about this all the time, which is what I call revenue critical role alignment. And you're probably the first person I've talked to in the B2B media space that actually goes out as a team approach to do the customer value creation discussion. And it's actually what, in the old days, software used to do. You had a sales engineer, you had your customer success, but you made sure that that client was not only hearing the sales side, but also understanding how it works and what they should be doing actually to extend the ROI through the campaign results.
Yeah, definitely. So I can give you an example. We just launched some behavioral targeting in email, which is really, really interesting. It's been incredibly powerful. We're seeing like 31% increases in engagement rates through this new kind of way of targeting and building audience across our email network. And we've got about 300 newsletters. So we've got quite a bit of reach. It's a really fantastic approach, but it really was new for a lot of the sellers. It was far more technical. And the first few deals that had to get across the line, our product team was absolutely mission critical in that work. And we have folks in product who have worked in client facing roles before. So some of that really is the benefit also of having developed talent and move them into new roles and having some depth on the bench that could go out and understand the client facing work, not get too lost in the weeds, but help clients understand the power of the capability. I will always say that it's a lot easier to say the tough things when you're not the person asking for money. So if we can do that with our support teams and use them to educate and help clients get to an understanding, I think it's going to be far more successful in the long run.
Absolutely. Let's talk about, I think this is the next obvious question, understanding audience at scale. So you've emphasized that it's not just about activating 70 million users at once, but how deeply you understand the audience and segments of that audience and even subsegments of the segment. How does that, from a technical standpoint, the Bombora Future partnership, how can you describe actually how that is working? Like, how does that happen just for the audience? Because we're talking themes here and concepts, but maybe let's take it down a couple notches so that if somewhere we're really interested in figuring out like, hey, I want to do this, what's the process?
Sure. So we partner really closely with Bombora when we're building audiences, right? Because we leverage their expertise in addition to having our own teams and platform. But what we're doing effectively is putting together customized audiences. A lot of that could be target count list based for clients. So a client comes to us and they say, we're really trying to move the needle on these 200 accounts or this list of 1,000 accounts. And how can you help us do that? And our answer to that is to say, okay, great. Well, let's take a full funnel approach. Let's go from awareness all the way through conversion. And let's start that with a media program. And let's start by dialing in on that target account list, getting that running, across all the places and content that we think are relevant, and optimizing for performance and making sure that we understand obviously which accounts are popping and where the intent signals are coming from. And then going out with pieces that are more nurture related as we move into the funnel and education and thought leadership based. So we would start then retargeting those same companies with content, with webinars, with all the other types of things we can produce on their behalf. Media campaigns might still be running at that time. And we would then move kind of down funnel into conversion. And that might be multi-touch, for example. So people who've downloaded an asset, can we get them to download 2 to 3 assets? Can we get a number of people from a single organization to start downloading? And can we do that at scale? So those programs usually take at least a quarter to run. We've done them faster, but we find they're far more impactful when we're doing them over the course of, say, 3 months. And, that's really helped us move the needle for a number of clients. And we couldn't do that entirely by ourselves.
Totally. Well, I probably asked the question, it's not really technical, but that was a really good use case, which is what actually I was going after. And actually something people don't realize with first party data and intent data, the more interaction you have is the more valuable the data is. So you can't really do a campaign less than 3 months. And the campaign, in order to be successful, needs to have multi-touch point. You need to be where the customer is in order to really garner those insights, channel content, and even like what I call a multi-threaded buying team. The more enterprise sale you go up, it's not just one person.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Because if you're trying to move the needle, especially on an enterprise company or purchase cycles that are 18 months at least in some of these spaces for B2B, that's not something that, you can convert inside of 30 days and job done. I think typically our clients have much longer buy cycles. And so that influence piece is really, really important and has to be sustained.
And Jamie, I was just going to ask you to pipe in.
Yeah, anytime you're working with target account list, you're always running up against scale issues. What do we have? Who are we able to reach? Even with very robust databases like Future's, where they have a tremendous amount of first party data, in the model that Future has, we can actually look at, because they have the Bombora tag on all of their sites, which means that we can actually look across their entire portfolio that is aligned with the Bombora taxonomy to say, okay, so we're looking for businesses, people that work at these businesses, or we're looking for people that are coming to Future sites that are in market for a specific product. And as Allison said, we're not just limited to kind of some of their traditional kind of B2B brands, but maybe we can touch some of those folks on Decanter or other sites. So really being able to add that scale with the precision targeting by aligning all of their data under the same taxonomy.
So that's really awesome to add to this, because again, that just underscores the audience approach versus the brand approach. So it's not just the length of time and different channels, webinars, content marketing, advertising, document downloads, etc. It's across different brands, and even the not right top of mind one,
Right.
because that data is so critical. So that actually is I agree with you that this is going to require some really significant training on the sales side to actually be able to talk about. I just have just like a couple of clients I have, and I'm like, oh, they want to do this. So, Jamie, you have been a long-time advocate for enriched first-party data that, as you say, can unlock "quote-unquote" marketing magic. Can you describe for the audience by what you mean by that, and actually, in keeping in mind, because I get this question a lot, the issue of privacy and this cookie situation that is actually, it's like it's there, but it's never there. So, just would love your perspective on that.
So I had to acknowledge when I completely wholesale ripped somebody off, and I can't even acknowledge where I got it from. But I know when we were with you in Sarasota at Revved Up, and Allison and I were talking at Revved Up, talked about how if first party data is the bread and butter of a company, enriched first party data is the whole feast. And I think that is the best way to describe the power of enrichment. And so what you're really doing is taking this first party data that you're collecting, as a media company from your customers' interactions like web visits or signups or purchases, all the different ways that we're collecting first party data. And then you're really enhancing it, and you're enhancing it with additional context around, user interest, company information, job titles, firmographics. So you're taking that first party data that you've invested a lot in collecting, and you are enriching to create a much more robust and comprehensive profile that can be used to better understand your audience so that you can keep them coming back and engaged with your content. It can be used to produce higher CPMs against the campaigns that you're running, because now you're targeting, not just somebody that works at IBM, but you're targeting a senior decision maker at IBM. And you happen to know that they're in market for the product that's being sold. And so it's really powerful when you can do that enrichment to know much more about those visitors beyond what you're able to glean within your four walls. As you look at the shift rate, as we look at, why is enriched data and first party data having its day in the sun as it should be? It's because of exactly what you said, Heather. It's because of heightened privacy standards. It's because of the threat to the third party cookie. So enriched first party data really does become critical to these brands who, 5 years ago could pretty confidently say they could just rent this information. They could rely on a third party segment. But now what they have to do, and where the real opportunity that we've been talking about now for a couple of years in media comes in, is now they have to lean on this really clean permission-based data that our publishers own. And our goal with enrichment is to make that data more valuable.
There's something to be said about advertising efficiency. Everyone has always said advertising ROI, the advertising efficiency equation, return on advertising investment. But this actually allows you to do that, because if you use the scenario that you just described, I am, as an advertiser, able to use that data to funnel my marketing resources to the people, my prospective buyers that are in market, that I know from this data. And on top of it, that data is telling me their channel preferences, their content theme preferences, their timing preferences. When are they most apt to be online doing research? And so you can use this data to do a very tightly crafted, not just a target account campaign or ABM, it's taking it like 5 steps further.
Yeah.
Right? Because I can have an account list of 50 target accounts, but maybe only 20 of them are in market. I want to focus on those 20.
Right. And you want your media partner to guide you in that and to be the expert in that, to say, let me help you. And great, you gave me a list of 50 people. I've identified half of them are actually in market. You also didn't give me a list of another 300 that I've identified from my own data that are in market for your solution. And we should put them in this campaign. So you are really becoming that expert resource to these brands that are now fortunately being forced to come and say, I need to use first party data, right? It's what I have to do. And it's good because it's better. It's going to perform better. It's genuine, it's real, and it's measurable.
Allison.
I was going to say, without a doubt, right? We have a lot of clients who are trying to figure out how to navigate this, and especially where budgets are constrained or getting tightened, it becomes a question of efficacy for them, right? They've got to defend everything that they're spending. They've got to make sure they're directing it in the right places for maximum impact. And to Jaime's point, a lot of our customers come in with a sense of who they're targeting. And there does need to be a conversation then about like, help us understand why, right? Like, this is the area of focus. Is that sector related? Is that tied to corporate goals? Here's what we're seeing and here's what we can tell you resonates really well from our understanding of our audience and who you're talking about. And so we think the best advised direction is the following type of program or activation. People really do have strong preferences. And we have people who love read newsletters like 3 to 4 times a week, but don't go to live events. And then we have people who have a high affinity for going to the live events, and they're at every single event year after year. And so it's a really kind of important thing to meet audience where they are, and also to help brands understand, maybe to really meet somebody where they want to be and help them with the types of things that allow a brand to connect in an authentic way to the audience that they're targeting and not have it feel super contrived.
I'll give you another example about preference and webinars. When I ran my business, we did webinars. There was like 4 types of people that registered. The people that registered that actually showed up, and they showed up consistently. They enjoyed participating on a webinar. Then there were and they stayed the full time. Then you had the people who would sign up, show up for half, and then leave. Then there were the other ones who consistently would register but never show up. But the reason why we found they were doing it is they were very interested in the topic. They knew they weren't going to show up, but they knew they were going to have the access to the on-demand, right? So the on-demand became on my time, not your schedule. And then as we got better, we also realized, you know what, maybe they want the topic, don't want the on-demand. So why aren't we making this webinar, turn it into a transcript and white paper that they can download later? Because these people much prefer to read.
Yeah, exactly. And I fall in that third group, right? Like I subscribe and sign up for a lot of webinars that I know I don't necessarily have the time to attend at the time they're running, but I'm going to listen to it in the car while I'm driving somewhere. I'm going to listen to it while I'm working on something. I'm trying to stay abreast of a topic and make sure I'm educated and understand what the market's doing. And there's, I think, a lot of influence power in that piece of things. Showing up and being a hand raiser inside the webinar is incredibly powerful, but really choosing to consume the content regardless is an intent signal.
Yep, for sure.
And knowing too, right? I'm definitely in that category. I register for 2 or 3 a week, and they kind of go in my bucket of I'm going to listen to them. But knowing that you have the ability then to, whether or not they attend live, they registered, what company they're coming from. And so then you're able to measure after the event to see what's happening within that company that registered. Is research increasing around the product or the topic that we're talking about? So is it actually working? It's not just a registration. It goes into that much deeper measurement category that brands are now demanding.
100% on that one, right? Like, look at it from a holistic picture. Did they register for the webinar? Are they looking at products in this category? Are they consuming that you guys are able to bring to the table, which is great. So you talked about advertisers demanding the receipts. I don't think that's new. They've always wanted some sort of level of ROI. In the old days, it was how many impressions, how many click-throughs, how many leads, just very general numbers. But we're talking about today, I'm very curious, how has this changed the depth of reporting and the frequency of reporting that you need to deliver to your clients on a consistent, ongoing basis for them to show me the receipts?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to this. This is one that's evolving, and I think something we're very focused on at the moment. So we'll have some more news on that next quarter. But to your point, the metrics like clicks, impressions, viewability, people are trying to ensure there was a moment of connection and was this seen, kind of what I'd say like our true false values. But where the demand is now is in understanding a deeper value of, are we moving an account forward? Like, is this actually progressing our mission? Is this not just from a return on ad spend kind of perspective, but is this going to move our opportunities forward in pipeline? Now, the demand for a lead is a sales qualified lead that is literally like ready to pick the phone and have a conversation. That doesn't happen from one download, right? And so that is then a requirement to tell that story in data, because it's not going to be an easy conversation in every case. It's kind of the holy grail of being able to take people on a journey of what the story is and how it's progressing or where optimization's needed if something's not working right. Jaime, feel free to jump in on that too. Be curious how others are tackling it.
Yeah, Allison, yes, right. No notes on what you're saying. We see the same thing. I think that with some of the frustration with the increased demand for more receipts and more receipts, I think with everything, there is opportunity. And as we're in this world of, we kind of shift from brand advertising eras to performance advertising eras. And we're definitely in a performance advertising time. But with the increased measurement comes the opportunity to bring just what Allison said back into the picture, that this is a buying journey. And yes, we're going to have some of your buyers in a stage where they're ready to have a conversation. We're going to have some of them that we're still nurturing. The most important thing that we do, though, is be able to offer you that visual of actually how we're impacting this full journey and how research is growing among the businesses that you told us you want to reach, and maybe some of those that you weren't even aware were in market for your products that we have now brought forward and are researching your company. And so there is opportunity there to obviously be held accountable, right? To clicks, impressions, conversions, leads, but also to tell a much bigger story about how you're impacting just awareness of their brand and research within the companies they want to reach.
Yeah, the role of customer success in media, and especially companies that are doing what you're doing, Allison, at Future, is going to become ever more important because you need to have someone who's expert in having those conversations, and they're still very educational, right? It's educating the client about what this looks like versus what that looks like and why this one you're going to wait and massage, and this lead over here, or this lead cohort is actually the ones your team should be going after because of these signals. And those have to be ongoing, active conversations. So sales should be focusing on acquiring sales. They're not going to have the time to do this. And so this role, I think, is just becoming ever more important. I think I heard you say you have a customer success team internally, correct?
Yeah, we do. We actually, to your point, I think it's about evolving the teams for where the market is going. Our client success team has new leadership coming in. We've hired a new VP of client success and ad ops who starts at the end of September. We're really excited about, who brings a really strong agency background. Part of that intention for us is being able to say, let's make sure we're really dialed in on the clients and what they need. And this body of work that is, quite frankly, right now, laborious. It's a great space for evolution in terms of how it gets done. But today we have a need that the market has a need we need to meet. And so how are we going to do that? And what are we going to focus these teams on? How do we free them from the technical work in the delivery lanes? Because a lot of that requires a great deal of technical expertise. But how do we direct energy at the right accounts to help them move forward as partners for our business, but also just to make sure the business is healthier across the board?
Yep. Yep. So let's talk about competitors. One of the things that concerns me is AI has made it just so easy for anyone to pop up overnight and, pose a competitive threat. This is another one of my pet peeves. Everyone's like, I'm going to start a media company, or I'm going to launch events, or I want to do a community. And I'm like, go for it. It's really hard. It's like, so I don't think it's so easy to actually, break down competitive moats. But that's not to say, though, there isn't a lot of noise. What are you seeing that causes you concern as it relates to new competitors emerging overnight?
No, I mean, this is one much like you, Heather. This is I could quickly get on my pedestal here and talk for a while because it's really, it's unfortunate, right? That there are, I forget the number off the top of my head, but it's, a significant percentage of advertising is being directed to these sites that aren't actually real media, right? They're just AI driven, content. And that's obviously going to continue to grow. And of course, that is a threat to traditional legacy media companies that are investing in real journalism and investing in understanding their content. But I also see the real opportunity here because, Allison was just talking about how laborious it is, right? And to do some of the work that's required in the customer success space to tell this holistic, show me the receipt story. Well, that's where AI can come in and I think really create some efficiencies to free up these media companies that are producing real journalism, investing in one-to-one conversations with their audiences, and actually free up that space for the humans behind that to do what they do best. And it's to provide, voice to this content, real personality to the content, real understanding to the content. There's so much opportunity for the legacy media companies right now to really lean into AI, remove repetitive tasks, clear the decks so that the people can actually be critical thinkers and be strategic and innovate. I have an opportunity to work with the original content creators, Heather, right? These companies have been creating content for hundreds of years and they're really good at it. And we all know when we look at AI content that's just created from AI, it's flat, right? There's no personality, there's no soul to it. And that's where the people that are really good at this can really now step up, get out from under the administrative task and really shine. And that will produce results. There is no world where you can convince me today somebody running a media company solely off of AI is going to succeed. Right? They're going to get some money. They're going to have some mailbox money coming in, but it will fall flat.
Yeah. Allison, thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think of this as a catalyst, right? Not threat. And so publishing has had to evolve before and it's evolving now. And so to Jamie's point, there's an operational gain to be made. There's also a space where, Future, we believe very deeply in trust and quality of information and the role that has to play because people at the end of the day are they're trying to learn, right? They're trying to understand something. They are trying to figure out where do I get that kind of information? A lot of the LLMs also are looking for depth of knowledge. They're trying to avoid just skimming off the top and not having meaningful contributions as those technologies are evolving and looking to become more powerful. So we have an AI working group, right? We've written a whole lot of documentation and guidance for our editorial teams. And also, in the vein of unleashing them to kind of carry forward the evolution from their perspective. We are using AI to drive the business forward, to evolve how we serve the markets, how we serve our clients. And to me, that's the exciting piece. We did a deal with OpenAI very early on. I think, I am lucky to be at a company that wants to embrace the challenge and find the path forward. And that's been a ton of fun and it will continue to be. We've written in the B2B space, for example, we just released what we call Ad Genie. Ad Genie will rewrite our clients' creative for the newsletters, and it will do that so that it improves performance. And so for a lot of our clients, that's enormously helpful to say, listen, this is what's actually going to resonate better. And let's talk about how we use this to save some time, but also just to help you see better results off the back end of this.
You already have an AI product that is being wrapped around an existing one to improve customer outcomes.
Yeah, which has been fun. I mean, it's been interesting to develop, right? It's been a partnership across our ad ops team, our product teams, and our tech teams. And so that development happened really probably over about the last 6 months. And it's also, required us to bring our teams on a journey, which is this is not necessarily threat to Jamie's point. It's about, how do we get the work into a different place or tackle it differently? And so I think as a leader and a change leader, that to me has actually been one of the most interesting aspects of this is how do we evolve our workforces at the same time that we're evolving products?
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to move to this next. This is what I actually had to stop myself from asking earlier because everyone talks about wanting to do first party data, the AI. But I always say, if you don't have your data house in order and your tech stack in order, and you don't have a single source of truth, you really have no business thinking about that far ahead. You have to get the data house in order. You both shared the tech stack fragmentation, team training, and even what I call the saboteur in the room can derail data activation. What are the biggest pitfalls you've seen, Allison, at your company, and then Jamie, just from clients you've worked with that have really derailed what could have potentially been a huge win-win investment and project?
Yeah, definitely. I'll go back to the Ad Genie project because that was one that we really had to roll out a net new technology to a really broad working group. And we needed to bring them on a journey about, the training. And so I think the lesson we learned on that was really that we needed to help them understand the what and the why, not just how to use a new tool or what it could do for the clients. And so we really needed to make sure that we actually stopped and started thinking about, what are the core tenets that we want them to be thinking about? What are the mantras we want to be in the back of their minds and true north for those kinds of adoptions? And so we did training, we kind of double backed on our training, frankly. So we rolled it out and we found we weren't seeing the adoption we wanted and had to go back and dig into that. And it was something we needed to do a little bit better and more thoroughly, which meant bringing people on the journey and finding better ways for it to connect for them to see the value in it. So I hope that answers the question. But that was a net new technology, not necessarily, fragmentation. We are in the process of even moving some of our more disparate data sets, I would say, into one environment. And we're really excited about that. It's going well, but that's, gets into some really complicated tech conversations in terms of how do you connect the dots and those types of things. I would say timing, making sure you're really aware of what your timeframes look like is something else to be thinking about. If you think it's going to take 3 months, it's going to take 4. We don't all like to say that, but it's just a truth that tends to exist.
I was going to say, you're doing great then, because I was going to say you say 3 and 6.
Yeah, depends on the product.
Right.
And Allison, I admire and I hope I don't get in trouble here as I work with many, many great brands, but I admire what Future has done and their commitment to unifying their tech stack very quickly because you've had an acquisition spree, Allison, and you've brought on so many brands so quickly. And from what I've heard, the immediate, goal number one was to get everybody on the same tech stack. And that's really unusual. And it really speaks to how well Future understands that the more you have siloed data, and to your question, Heather, that is the untapped opportunity. That is so much missed opportunity when you've got this siloed data and you may have incredibly rich, powerful data sitting in one silo. It's not connected to another data set. So you're truly not getting the full potential out of all of this data that you have. Heather, we were sitting in Washington, D.C. You put together a great event on this very topic and on really understanding all the data assets that you have as a media company. One of my big takeaways from that were those companies that did invest, much like Future is doing, in unifying that tech stack. And all of a sudden, they become not really a media company, they become data as a service. They take that data, they realize they have a very unique data set that serves the industries that they've been serving for years as a content vehicle. And now they have data that they're able to sell. Once that data is unified, you really can, monetize it in ways that I don't think we could ever have dreamed of.
100%. Actually, today is my day of talking about things that annoy me. Well, my next annoyance is
We're here for you, Heather.
It's fine. When they call data exhaust, it just makes the hair on the back of my neck. It's not data exhaust. It's fuel, right? The data is the fuel. It's the gas that makes the car go. And the car, you have the steering wheel and the seats and all. It's those are the channels. Those are the themes. But without the data, none of that other stuff really matters, right? Because you're just not going to have the right efficiency or targeting or relevance. And by the way, the value goes both ways. It's for the audience value. They get huge value out of more efficiency as they're going through their buying journey, right? And on the flip side, you have efficiencies and faster, better curated connections between the seller and the buyer, which both want at the end of the day.
There's a lot of conversations about where friction belongs or doesn't belong in the user journey. But when I think about serving audience, it really is that I want to do that well. And I want to be able to do that in a way that is, we've all had experiences on sites or mobile apps or whatever, where it has not been as easy as we would like it to be. And certainly, I think that's a little bit of a true north for us to always be thinking about. But Jaime, I appreciate your calling out as a portfolio media company. It's really kind of something we have to solve as we evolve as a business, because if we don't, we could end up, in a really fragmented place. And so it's not always easy, but it's extremely beneficial to do that work as fast as possible. So it's also the reason that we can reach across all of these brands, because we can send one segment and hit 85 websites, right? And so that's a really powerful thing.
No, that's just to reinforce what Jaime said in terms of massive kudos to you and to Future. And that is, you would not believe how many media companies don't take that approach. They don't put the value as data as the fuel, and that it's the first thing you do when you acquire another company is you must get them aligned and on the same system, single source of truth. It's got to be the top priority. So, all right, we're running out of time. So I'm going to just go to my last question before. I admire you both so much. I want to lean into this one, which is the leadership lessons you've learned going through this transformation. And it's, when you're in media, I feel like we've been in this transformation mode since, 1999. So it's kind of like that the pedal never let up. But right now it feels like it got hit very hard down to the floor and you just have to have some grit. So I just love to, what lessons you've learned as leaders at your respective companies.
Sure. You want to go first, Jaime?
Sure, I'll go first. So great way to wrap it up, Heather, because I started by saying I've been in this business for 25 years. So I have lived through the initial digital disruption of the internet, which makes me sound so old, but it's so true. And then, there's cookies and there's privacy and all of the things that I feel like we've been fighters in a ring and you're just kind of jabbing the punches. Now we have, second to maybe the introduction of the digital ecosystem to media, we have AI, and no doubt about it, right? This is incredibly disruptive, but a lot of opportunity. And so as a leader, I think that the one thing, there are probably two things I can think of. One is I cannot communicate clearly enough or too much to our teams about, yes, strategies are set, right? And we're working towards, a strategy. The tactics may change and may change very quickly because the technology is allowing us to do that. We can spin up products and code that would before take months that we can do now in hours. And so we're still all working towards that same strategy, but the tactics are going to change. And so the more we can, I at least can just communicate very clearly, reiterate what that strategy is, what our mission is, why we're doing this. Some of that exhaustion that comes from living through disruption like this it makes it easier, right? Just by continuing to reiterate that we're still the same strategy. Tactics are probably changing and changing very quickly. The other thing I will say is a real human-centered approach to leadership, I think, is essential right now. I will show up to the team and say, I'm a little bit tired. There are no more business as usual quarters or months or weeks or even days. And that can be tiring, and just acknowledging that and saying, I am empathetic, but I do trust the strategy. I trust the transparent communication that we have as a company and as a team. And so that really human-centered approach to leadership, I just think it's important to show up and say, yes, there are days it's invigorating and exciting, and there are days where I want to go to bed.
That's so true. I agree completely, Jamie. I think the key for me when I think about it is the same as you, right? What is true north, and how do I clear the noise and give people focus? Because if we get distracted by everything, it's just exhaustive. Nobody can carry all of that, right? And the truth of the matter is no one person can change anything overnight by themselves. And so we need them to take care of each other, to be resilient as a group together. And, on those days where somebody shows up and says, I'm really tired, to show up for them and say, no problem, let me help, right? Or how do I help you in this moment? Because that's where the resilience comes from, is we can't, we each have to kind of carry the load at different times. The other thing I think for me is about where we see challenges occurring or where things have gotten hard is that you put the squad together to go solve the problem. You give them a deadline and you give them room to innovate, and you give them the power to change that outcome, because that to me is also how you get through those moments of friction and get to a place where they can help solve things, and it's empowering, and it obviously creates growth for the individuals and hopefully is helping your business move forward. But I think that's also a big part of leading, is finding the right ways to relieve tension and turn it into acceleration.
Great answers. Great answers. All right. I'm going to do one rapid fire. We don't have time for two. And I'm going to start off with Allison. What is the book on your nightstand right now?
Oh, yeah. This book is always on my nightstand. So I will probably recommend this to everybody I cross paths with for the rest of my life, which is a book called West with the Night. And it is the memoir of Beryl Markham, who was the first woman. She was not the first woman, but the first person to fly across the Atlantic Ocean from Britain to North America. She did that in 1936. She was born in Kenya. She was just fearsome to behold. And so her story is just one that I find inspiring, because she just didn't really let anybody tell her what her life was going to be. And she just went out and did it. So I have a ton of respect for her. And my quote for you from that book is that if a man has any greatness in them at all, it comes to light not in one flamboyant hour, but in the ledger of their daily work, which for me in ops is kind of, the focus, right? It's going to be bit by bit, grind by grind a little bit some days. And so everybody should read it. Everybody should read it.
Absolutely. And Jamie, you had to tell us what's on your nightstand.
So Jane Austen's book club, and I will admit to you that it has been on my nightstand since July, and it is a great book, and I am committing to finish it by December, by Christmas.
Awesome.
It's a fantastic book all about the writers that influenced Jane Austen that weren't introduced to the canon, but they had such a strong influence on her writing and her career, and hearing their stories and what it was like to be a writer in that time. It's a fascinating read. It's like a history lesson that's very readable. So having said that, I will admit I've been making my way through it since July.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies, for joining us. And just a quick shout out that Revved Up 2026 registration is now open. And for those of you who don't know what Revved Up is the premier conference for CEOs and their revenue critical C-suite teams who are using data NI disruption. This year's theme is redefining growth, data AI, and the business model shift ahead. To learn more, please visit www.h2klabs.com/revved-up. Revved has 2 V's, but we'll also put it in the show notes. And with that, thank you so much. And we'll hopefully see you on the Revenue Room podcast next week.